Hey guys, welcome to the Liberal Hive Mind. We've got to get into some of this leftist nonsense, this leftist garbage, specifically these bogus narratives. One of the most bogus, one of the most dishonest, and frankly, evil of leftist narratives in the modern day is the Nancy Pelosi narrative in terms of their framing around the events of January 6th. It was the worst day in American history. Kamala Harris told us multiple times it was worse than 9/11, worse than Pearl Harbor.
Not only a place on our calendars, but a place in our collective memory. December 7th, 1941. September 11th, 2001, and January 6th, 2021.
Because the attack came from within. In fact, some leftists have argued that it's worse than Pearl Harbor and 9/11 combined. Take that, MAGA chud. Generally, they'll say it in that kind of tone because they're absolute lunatics. But anyways, the narrative is the January 6th is the worst thing. Anybody involved on the day of is a terrorist, should be treated as a terrorist, as a top threat to the homeland, should be put in solitary confinement. Donald Trump should be imprisoned forever. That's the narrative. That's what they tell you. But again, leftist fantasy versus, basic reality. There tends to be quite a large gap there, a chasm the size of the damn Grand Canyon. And it started with Tucker Carlson getting a good chunk of January 6th security footage tapes. He didn't get all of it. And of course, the release of those tapes, it wasn't exactly good for Nancy Pelosi's little precious narrative. Well, guess what? Just as expected, right on frickin' cue, right after Mike Johnson gets elected to his speakership post, more footage was just released, and you'll see very clearly with this video footage exactly why Nancy Pelosi and the feds were working so frickin' hard behind the scenes over the last, let's say, almost a year at this point, attempting to suppress, hide, and delete any evidence, any remaining evidence, security footage evidence, pertaining to the events of January 6th. Democrats coined the term the big lie, hashtag the big lie. Well, here's a big lie. Nancy Pelosi's big lie, MSNBC and CNN's freaking big lie relating to the events of January 6th. It seems as though it was exactly as described, at least described from right-wing pundits and outlets, essentially a big field trip turned into a massive psyop. We've got some stuff to get into, so let's roll the tape. All right, folks, so I'm flowing. Let's keep the flow going. We've got a bunch of clips released here. Let's go clip by clip, and I'll just say a word before we play the clip. I think that'll really help put things into perspective. Folks, it was an insurrection, a literal extremist, MAGA extremist attempt to overthrow the government. I know I was supposed to say one word, but anyways, insurrection. Does that seem like an insurrection to you? That seems like a bunch of casual Capitol police officers escorting peaceful protesters through the Capitol halls. What about this one? Well, let's add a word for it. Violent MAGA extremists. Just casually walking through the Capitol doors, Capitol police officers opening the doors and escorting people in and out of the building. How about this? Violent clashes between horrible, violent MAGA supporters and those patriotic Capitol police officers. They arrested the man, and apparently it was such a non-big deal, they ended up fist bumping him and just saying, all right, bucko, enjoy the rest of your day. MAGA supporters trashing the Capitol, disrespecting the rotunda. Again, just casually walking through quite peacefully. Police officers, Capitol Police officers, it seems as though not a care in the world, not a worry in the world, just letting people through. I wonder why the January 6th committee, whose sole purpose was supposedly to get to the bottom of all this, to get to the truth, consistently refused to acknowledge the existence of these clips or just the narrative itself. I wonder why that is. Well, obviously, there's not much to wonder here. It's extremely clear what the case is. This essentially proves that Nancy Pelosi's narrative was wrong. It proves that we were, in fact, right. Were there some bad actors on the day? Absolutely. And we'll be the first to condemn them. But the overwhelming majority of individuals present on that day were simply peaceful patriots practicing their First Amendment right to peaceably assemble, to have their voice heard, and to protest their government. That was the overwhelming truth of the day, much more so than any other BLM protest. Yet the few who did wrong are being used to spin a narrative, to slander an entire group of people, an entire voter bloc, as evil, deplorable, MAGA extremists who hate democracy and want to overthrow government. Did that seem like the events of a government-attempted mutiny and overthrow to you? To me, it certainly didn't. And that's because it very clearly wasn't. It never was. That was a BS narrative, a Nancy Pelosi media collusion psyop political strategy that was attempted here, and it could not be any more clearer. Nancy Pelosi calling off security of the day, being followed around by a documentary film crew. I mean, come on. It doesn't get any more clear. And the amount of lying is just what's really truly astonishing, just so insane. You know, we've had multiple Capitol Police officers who've been branded as heroes and celebrities. There's that one guy with the freaking tattoos everywhere, Nancy Pelosi's little, puppet, let's call him. Well, multiple times he was called to testify in front of the January 6th committee. He did media tours, generally on every left-wing, outlet that you could possibly think of. And he painted this picture of hopelessness and despair and panic. Capitol Police officers didn't know what to do. They were overthrown, overwhelmed. It was almost like war times. They have PTSD following the events. They were essentially fighting for their lives, unsure if they were going to go home safe the next day. That's what they tell you. Or at least that's the narrative that some of these Capitol Police officers spun. Capitol Police officers with very uncomfortable, very close relationships with Nancy Pelosi. Let's leave it at that. But anyways, that's what they said. Well, if we contrast that with, again, basic reality as we saw in the video footage, I didn't really get that vibe. It seemed to me as though every Capitol Police officer caught on film during the day, opening doors, casually just standing around, fist bumping people after releasing them. It seems to me as if, yet again, it was a bogus narrative to attempt to pull at the heartstrings of American citizens to get them to turn on Donald Trump, as if he was, leading the worst, most horrible, scariest day in modern American politics and American history. Obviously, there's a group here colluding together, acting very, very dishonestly. And, it brings me back right again, asking a very similar question, or I guess asking a question that leads to a point that I tend to make quite often. They say, you're horrible, you're terrible, you're such a bad person. Those people present on January 6th, though, those are bad, deplorable, irredeemable extremists who have bought into an anti-democratic cult. That's the way they paint you. You're supposedly the bad guy, but I don't know, people who showed up peaceably on a day to protest and have their voice heard, participate in the civic process within the bounds of their constitutional rights, I feel like those people probably didn't do anything really that bad. Those people probably shouldn't be labeled as horrible, deplorable, and irredeemable. But the people here who obviously pulled a massive Nancy Pelosi psyop, the same people who constantly lie in front of Congress, or who misrepresent the facts in front of Congress, or who plagiarize fake evidence in front of Congress, like Adam Schiff and Liz Cheney did, the same people who work hand over fist to suppress video footage that would have aided in the defense of many individuals who have been treated very unfairly and persecuted by the DOJ, by Joe Biden's very politicized, biased DOJ. I feel like the people who push this narrative so dishonestly and so divisively, those to me are the extremists. Those to me are the deplorable, irredeemable pieces of, work. I'm just gonna leave it at that though. That's the video, that's the update, that's what we got for you. More evidence suggesting the same, that Nancy Pelosi is a sociopath, maniacal liar. Nothing new there. That's pretty much the video. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed it, make sure to leave a like and possibly subscribe, and hopefully I'll see you on the next one.